Good evening, Facebook attendees. Thanks for joining the session regarding the American Rescue Plan Act. There are three meetings in this series, the first tonight being primarily an information session. What is the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA as I've heard it referred? If you read the press release from Wednesday, May 19th, it stated that the city received $88.3 million to overcome the impact of COVID-19 on the city's economy, adding that this is the first installment. These sessions are opportunities to ask questions about the plan, for the administration to tell you how some of the money will be used to stabilize the city's finances due to the loss in revenue. This is also a great opportunity for you, excuse me, to share how you would like to see the money spent. We want to hear from you, hence the purpose of all these meetings. Also, while watching this session, please share it. We are talking about the City of Newark's finances. This is information that many people don't have access to or the chance to hear about, and we're offering it to you. My name is Andrea Mason, and I serve as the Senior Manager of Newark People's Assembly. Myself and Jennifer Fano will serve as the moderator for tonight's meeting, as well as the ones to come. To stay informed with the happenings in the City of Newark, please sign up for our email list by emailing us at newarkpeoplesassembly@ci.newark.nj.us. I am sure we are all going to learn a bunch of information tonight, and I'm almost certain that you're interested in knowing how $88.3 million will be spent. So as I stated earlier, please share the meeting and plan to interact via the news feed. The next two meetings will be able to join via Zoom directly, or you'll have the same option of interacting via the news feed on Facebook. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I now introduce you to the City of Newark's Business Administrator, who will explain his role, because most people don't know what a business administrator does, Eric Pennington.
Thanks, Andrea. Good evening, everyone. I am the business administrator, and my responsibility is to run the day-to-day operation of the city, and I'm principally responsible for the money that the city spends. I'm extraordinarily fortunate that I have a great team of financial advisors. We have a finance director, Danielle Smith. I have a budget manager and budget director, Darlene Tate. My chief of staff, Yolanda Williams, and a deputy business administrator, Keisha Daniels. Those are essentially the people who give me advice and guidance with respect to the use of funds. Now, Andrea already spoke about the city receiving federal stimulus money pursuant to President Biden's American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and the ARPA funds. We have received already in hand 1/2 of the allocation. So the full allocation is $176,667,606. And that amount is determined by a formula that the United States government applied to cities of our size, excuse me, throughout the United States, and based on other federal monies that we get from the federal government. Those funds are coming to the city in what they call two tranches. The first tranche of money we received a couple of weeks ago, it was in the amount of $88,333,803. And so we have put together a plan, a basic skeletal plan of how it is we intend to spend that money. The mayor has directed us to make sure that we use the money to shore up revenue losses that we've experienced throughout the pandemic. And those revenue losses principally come from property taxes and special taxes. Those special taxes include hotel taxes and parking taxes that we're not going to receive, and other special taxes that we ordinarily have. I already said hotel taxes. The four general areas, very broad areas that the federal government has identified where we can use the funds are to respond to public health needs and economic damages from the pandemic. As I said, replacing lost revenue, which we've identified at somewhere around $30 million so far. Providing premium pay or hazard pay for essential employees who work during the pandemic. and investing in necessary infrastructure, which includes water infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, which allows for internet access to homes. And so we put together a plan to spend that money. But we think it's critically important that we hear from the residents as to how the residents believe the money should be spent. We want to get the money into the hands of affected residents and affected local businesses who have suffered greatly throughout this pandemic. And with that, I'll turn it back to Andrea Mason.
Thanks, Mr. Pennington. So already on Facebook, there is the conversation already starting about how this money can be spent. So do you want to start hearing some of these comments?
Absolutely. Comments,
All right.
questions, and I will do my best to answer all of them.
And actually, I have my own question first. You mentioned the full allocation. What is that amount?
Yes, the full amount is $176,667,606. And that is payable in two tranches, the first of which we received. The second amount, one half of it is in receipt now. The other half will be paid out May of 2022.
Okay, so May of, so it's a year from now.
1 year, yes, 1 year.
So is the 88, is that half?
Yes.
I didn't do the math. Okay.
It's half. Yes, it's half.
All right. So I see a few comments specifically about rental assistance, about doing a lottery. So the rental assistance, they're doing a lottery. People have been on the waiting list for the money. So I'm thinking back in January, as you are aware, we offered rental assistance for those individuals and the money would go directly to the landlords. So some of the residents still haven't gotten that rental assistance. They're in fear of eviction. So can some of this money, I know you mentioned that, we're trying to get it directly in the hands of the people, our residents. So how specifically can that happen?
Yes, we intend to have an additional program where a chunk of this money will go for rental assistance as well. But let me address the issue that was raised with respect to prior funds. I believe the questioner is asking about monies that we received specifically for rental assistance. And we had an application process for those affected tenants who were behind in their rent to receive rental assistance, which we have to pay directly to the landlords. One of the problems is many of these landlords have decided that they'd rather evict the tenants, perhaps because they think that they can get more rent, or for whatever reason, they have a tenant that they didn't want to have. So they haven't complied very well. And so we were waiting for information from them in order to get that. That has moved forward much, much faster now. And the money that should have been put in the hands of those tenants to their landlords should be moving forward at a much more quick pace. We've actually retained the services of an outside firm to assist us with that, and we'll do the same as we move forward. And can I add one more point to that, Ms. Mason? Yeah, the additional point I want to add is the moratorium on evictions we expect is going to end at some point soon. And so if this money is not in hand, those residents, those tenants, run the risk of being evicted. So we are working with our law department and with the court system here in Essex County for the city to put together a certified letter that each one of those tenants will be able to take to court and let the court know that the funds are available and they will be paid to the landlord for the back rent. And that should first forestall any eviction. So we're in the process of making sure that those affected residents have that letter available.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pennington. And another comment that we have, a resident state, we want residents-owned businesses to be supported and funded, and we want residents to be the property owners of residential and commercial real estate. So do we have opportunity for Norkers who are not homeowners to receive some of this funding?
Absolutely. One of the things that we're looking to do, there's a couple of buckets that we would like to see, and certainly depends in large measure on what the residents want. But one of the things that we are looking at right now, and we want to make sure that it doesn't adversely affect residents more than it helps them is to provide a few $1 million of this money to extend unemployment benefits for Newark residents who have exhausted their unemployment benefits. Right now, the thinking is that we will provide an additional $500 per month to a number of residents. We are compiling data from New Jersey State Unemployment to identify those residents who live in the city of Newark who were eligible for unemployment, got it, and it ran out. There's another bucket of employees or residents of Newark rather, who have applied for unemployment and still haven't gotten that unemployment check. So we want to help them as well. The concern that I'm addressing there is to make sure that we don't pay money now and it's going to affect that individual's ability to get unemployment insurance moving forward. So we're getting some clarification from the state with respect to that. I think the second part of your question, Jennifer, about businesses is we want to put several $1 million again into the hands of small local businesses who need funds as well. The mayor's already had plans out there to give millions of dollars, but we think that they need more. The third area is that the mayor, who has been a very forward-thinking, groundbreaking mayor with respect to the social impact of these funds, has established what's called the Universal Basic Income Fund. We expect to take about $3.5 million of this money and contribute it to the Universal Guaranteed Basic Income as well. And that too will get directly into the hands of certain Newark residents.
So one of the things that are common, well, two of the things that are commonly complained about are our roads as well as the tree stumps. So can any of this money be used to make sure that our streets are paved and not just, 10 blocks at a time or 10 miles of street? Like, can we get the entire city paved? And can we have a mass removal of tree stumps?
I think those are great suggestions. Without question, paving is an issue that affects everybody who travels in the city of Newark, whether you own a car, whether you ride a bike, a motorcycle, take public transportation, you want paved streets. So yes, part of our plan is to use some of these funds for paving. It's mighty ambitious to pave every mile of street all at one time. It's unlikely we can do that. But we do have a plan right now to pave more than 40 miles of roads throughout this paving season. And the paving season essentially runs from now, late April, early May, until October, November, because that's when the asphalt can be produced. And so during that period of time, some people may say that they're being inconvenienced because we will be paving roads. In fact, we've started doing a fair amount right now. And in doing so in connection with a lead service line replacement program. You may have been inconvenienced on the one hand, but tremendously benefited from the lead service line replacement program. Again, Mayor Baraka is forward thinking and has the residents front of mind. And so we have replaced now over 18,000 lead service lines, which has caused many streets to be dug up and they're being repaved. So we intend to coordinate the repaving of the lead service lines and use some of the funds that we received from the American Rescue Plan Act, plus our municipal budget to increase the paving, as well as the funds that we get from the state of New Jersey.
Thank you so much. We do have another comment about, would there be assistance with the PSC&G? So people have concern about the electricity, and is there any opportunity for funding to be allocated for those in need?
I think they mean in terms of electricity being turned off for non-payment. Is that the issue, Jennifer?
They just specifically put assistance with PSC&G. So
Sure.
I can ask to clarify, but it would be to be able to pay their electricity bill.
That's fine. I mean, I think generally there are programs in place now outside of the city through public service directly and through the city to help if you're run the risk of having your electricity turned off, particularly for those individuals who have medical equipment that they need to have on, and PSC&G will address that. That was, I'm glad to hear that question, because that was not one of the areas that I had initially thought about including. But yes, I suspect that we should be able to put aside some money, because if individuals were affected by the pandemic and cannot pay for their gas and electric or water, that's something that we can certainly include in this process. So I'm jotting that down now, along with Andrea, who I'm sure is jotting this down as well. That's something that we should look at adding to that tranche of money. So yes, thank you.
So we do have a question about salaries. Is any of this money going to pay for bonuses, salaries, or raises?
Not directly. The American Rescue Plan Act does allow for certain of the funds to be used for hazard pay. And many of Newark's employees worked during this pandemic. And so theoretically, they can receive money as a result of the money that we're receiving. And we intend to do that. In terms of raises, I should say that the federal government specifically, I talked about what the money can be used for, but I didn't say what it can't be used for. It cannot be used to decrease taxes or to fill budget gaps that you would otherwise not have done anyway. So we can't take this and just use it as a windfall and just spend it willy-nilly. It has to be structured in a way that meets with the federal government's pretty strict requirements. The areas are broad, but we have to fall within the broad guidelines of the federal government's mandate with respect to the use of these funds.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
We have another comment, and this resident wants to know, what is the timeline going to look like, and how is there an application process for the different opportunities that will arise?
Certainly, absolutely. There will be application process. There'll be several application processes, because with respect to this $88+ million, we want to get it into the hands of people in several different ways. Each of the ways we get it to them through small business assistance, streamlining the business application process, extending unemployment benefits, universal basic income, what else I talk about? Rental assistance. Each one of those various buckets will require a process. We want to move as expeditiously as possible and get it into the hands of people as quickly as we can. But what does that mean? I happen to be involved with other cities throughout the United States who are dealing with these same issues. And what we have received from the federal government now is the money and interim instructions on how we can use the money. So they haven't given the final instructions yet on how we can use the money. So there's a risk. We believe it's a small risk that we may use some of these funds and it's not allowed by the federal government, and so we'll have to pay it back. We want to avoid that. So that's something that we're trying to do. But we don't want to be as risk averse as some cities who are waiting for the final rule from the federal government as to exactly how the funds can be used, because that rule is likely not going to come out until September or October of this year, and we don't want to wait that long. We want to get the money into the hands of the people. So we're going to move much more quickly than many cities throughout the country, but not at such a fast pace that we run the risk of having to claw this money back and then put ourselves and you, the residents, in a bigger hole. But we want to get this money to you as quickly as we can.
So this is a question that has been asked loosely throughout the last couple weeks, but so now we can get an actual answer. Can any of this money be used to support vaccination efforts by way of incentives?
Great question. Yes, the money can be used. The broad, again, the very broad initial guidelines from the federal government is that we can use this money to facilitate testing, vaccinating, and decreasing the likelihood that people will contract COVID-19. So there's I think, a very strong argument that we can incentivize our residents to be vaccinated. I don't know that we're going to pay somebody $10 per vaccination or $50 per vaccination, but we're certainly looking at incentive plans to make sure that we get that done.
What about like in other states where they did the lottery,
Yes.
where everybody is a part, everybody who's been vaccinated is a part of it, and they could possibly win a larger lump sum of money?
Absolutely. That's on the table. I'd love to hear from residents as to what they think what would make you go get vaccinated, uh, where right now you're hesitant to do so. But if we gave you if you were able to get tickets to a concert at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center or at the Prudential Center, or if you had a private exhibit showing at the Newark Museum, would that cause you to get a vaccine? We'd love to hear that from you. But those are things that right now are all on the table, and it's important that we hear from the residents as to what will be the most effective way to help them get their friends to get vaccinated. Even those of you who have already gotten vaccinated, perhaps even if you bring a friend, that would allow you to get entered into some drawing. Or you were not able to convince a family member to get it done. They're like, why should I go and do that? I don't want to be bothered with it. But if you convince your family member to go and get vaccinated, even if you've already been vaccinated, you too can potentially be one of the winners of some incentive package to get vaccinated.
Thank you so much. We have some comments about hazard pay. So someone suggested code enforcement officers should receive hazard pay.
I agree.
That was easy.
Yep.
Okay, and the next question, will any dollars be distributed to the CDCs in Newark?
Dollars will be available to the extent that they impact entities, public entities and certain private entities that were affected by COVID, by the pandemic. And to the extent CDCs were affected and we can demonstrate that and it will help our residents, then yes. Yes. Yeah. The caveat is there, it's got to be something that's going to help the residents of the city of Newark who were affected by the pandemic.
Just to let all of our viewing audience know, Jennifer and I, as much as we are moderating this Q&A session, we're not ignoring you. When we look down, we're looking at either our phone or the other computer screen, just trying not to miss anything. So we don't want you to think that we're not looking at you. It's only because our attention is just to something else at the moment.
Thank you for that. I was going to share the same sentiments. Another resident shared, could any of this funding allocate for more city jobs to open up?
Yes, great. I think that's another great question. One of the things that we're looking to do is to make sure that we make our neighborhoods and corridors safer and cleaner. We believe that because of the pandemic, it has caused us not to have the ability with respect to the workforce that we have to do as good a job with the entryways and corridors and cleanliness of neighborhoods. So even there are several things that we're looking to do. One of which is to hire small local vendors to work in the neighborhoods to do some cleaning of lots and side streets and main corridors and entryways. So that's not a direct employment with the city of Newark, but it's an opportunity to be hired by small vendors that will be funded through this money. In terms of hiring additional employees as direct employees of the city of Newark, again, to the extent that we can demonstrate that those funds are being used to affect pandemic loss, we'll do so. And if that allows us to hire more people under that guidance, we will. That may be one area where I have to await a little bit more guidance from the federal government. But I am sure it's the mayor's intention to make sure that as many people who can be hired will be hired. I'm sorry for that ringing over there. Apologize.
We didn't really hear it.
Ah, good.
Yes, it was really low. So you spoke about city's cleanliness, and although this isn't a direct question to that, this comment is about excavation. And due to the lead pipe removal, there are rodents, rats, in particular areas um, throughout the neighborhoods. So we will need constant servicing from animal control, basically, or extermination services throughout the neighborhoods.
Sure, great question. We certainly can use funds to address the elimination of rodents and other infestation, particularly to the extent that we can show that they increased during this pandemic because we didn't do as much baiting with the decrease in staff, that people weren't outside as much. So yes, that's definitely an area that we can look into. Another great suggestion. I'm going to jot that one down as well.
Would there be any stimulus for the residents?
Absolutely. I'm happy. This is great. To me, that's a repeat question, but it gives me an opportunity to restate what I said before, and maybe in a different way, because I may not have said it in as good a way as possible. And if not, I apologize. But yes, we want to have extended unemployment benefits for those residents who have exhausted their unemployment. We want to increase the amount of universal basic income that will be available to certain residents. We want to make sure that we increase the amount of rental assistance. And we also, there'll be an announcement coming out by our Economic and Housing Development Department where there will be incentives for developers to build lower and moderate income housing. Some of that money will be used for that. And that announcement should come out within the next week. And you will see that'll be an opportunity for our residents to get clean, affordable, up-to-date, sanitary, wonderful, beautiful housing. And that's something that we intend to use some of this money for.
So we spoke about hazard pay, but this is an interesting question. So we spoke to hazard pay as it relates to city employees. What about offering hazard pay to non-city employees like FedEx or UPS workers?
Unfortunately, that is one of the areas where the federal government has not allowed us to extend. However, if there was a business that can demonstrate that it was affected in Newark by the pandemic because of a loss of money, we could assist that business with having additional funds. Now, I I don't I don't think we've really thought about directing how those companies use those funds, but perhaps we should look into making sure that a certain amount of those funds are used to pay their employees, either to incentivize their employees for hazard pay or otherwise. I had not considered that, so that's another great suggestion, something that we can look at. So thank you.
And then we're going to continue. Sorry for the long pause. I'm trying to keep up with the different comments. And we have different, give me 1 second. Someone state pay residents that have been completed the vaccination process.
Another great question. Again, we are not looking at paying people to get vaccinated, but we are certainly looking at ways to incentivize others to get vaccinated, and that would include incentivizing you to bring your friends to get vaccinated, even if you've already been vaccinated. You have gone through and gotten the Moderna, 2 shots from Moderna or 2 shots from Pfizer or the 1 J&J shot, and you're feeling great. You're fully vaccinated. You can do all the things that the CDC says you can do, but your mother or your sister or your brother hasn't decided that they want to do it yet. Well, perhaps with a little convincing from you, by providing information about the efficacy of vaccinations and the benefit of vaccinations, you can bring them and you both can be incentivized. I think that's a great idea, and that is absolutely something that we need to implement.
Good spin, BA. Nobody's just gonna get the money directly into their hand just because they took the vaccination, but the incentive piece, that worked. How will the money affect the schools directly, or will it?
Give me 1 second. I just swallowed the wrong way. Sorry, could you repeat that question again, please, Andrea?
Yes. Are the schools affected by this money?
Yes, well, the schools, again, these are really, you have a really robust audience who's really thought this through. And I think these are good questions. I know it is widely said that no question is a bad question, but there are certain questions that make me think harder than other questions. And I think that these questions are really making me think about the best ways that I can carry out the mayor's mission and get this pandemic money into the hands of the appropriate people, excuse me. So the schools have a separate tranche of money. They're getting some of their own money from the federal government related to COVID, COVID awareness and addressing the COVID pandemic issues in the schools. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't collaborate to make sure that some of the things that we do that benefit the Newark residents can't be done in collaboration with the Newark school system. In fact, I'm on a call with the superintendent of schools every day, twice a day, and he is all about working hand in glove with the mayor and making sure that his students, who are all Newark residents, um, are benefiting from whatever resources we get from the federal government. So yeah, I think we should look to collaborate more with them by combining some of the funds that we have with some of the funds they have to get more money into the hands of Newark students and Newark residents.
So I was just thinking about this point and someone just brought it up. So I'm very grateful for the resident. And she shared, what about funds for people who are middle class that makes a little above low income? Give me 1 second because the comments are coming in. So I wasn't able to read it right away. So I'm going to repeat it again. What about funds for people who are middle class that makes a little above low income? Is there money for the working middle class who have suffered far less hours and are not making as much as they were before COVID?
Another great question. I think that oftentimes people who are, I'm using quotes, middle class, uh, are often overlooked, particularly at the federal level and at the state level. And so this question makes me realize that perhaps we haven't looked into how impactful the effects of COVID are for what we call our middle class residents here in the city of Newark. The objective is to make sure that people who have been adversely affected financially by COVID are assisted, and that would include middle class residents. So I think when we look at the application process and who it is we're trying to get money into the hands of, we have to make sure that it's a wide enough net, there's a wide enough pool so the people such as the one who asked this question have an opportunity to have some support, some pandemic relief support through these funds as well. So absolutely, that's something we should look at. And I would ask that caller or questioner if they have a more specific way of how they think this should be addressed. I would be happy to receive that through a follow-up chat or an email to me or through either Andrea Mason or Jennifer Fana, and I'll address that. I think that's a great question.
Perfect. So we'll take down the Facebook name
Great.
and look forward to an inbox. So another comment coming in is to bring back the Mayor's Office of Employment and Training, formerly known as MOET. And BA, I'm not sure of the difference between MOET and Newark Works. Do you know the difference?
No, I don't know that I know that there is a difference. I mean, Newark Works and uh, the Newark Works Development Board is charged with getting Newarkers hired. I mean, that's their job. I know that we have that uh, the Newark Works Board is responsible for summer youth employment. They're working on that now. So I don't know if that's embedded in that question. That is certainly one of the things that we're working on. In fact, we intend to use some of this money. This is not the direct question, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about one of the areas we would want to make sure that we have some funds allocated to increase the number of students who are employed during the summer, and to make sure that we have programs as well to make sure the students who might be affected by gang violence and the things that are going on in the city right now have a real opportunity to work with programs to try and minimize the threat of that activity. So without question, summer youth employment, um, uh, and ongoing annual employment for not just for the youth, but for all of us is something that we need to use some of these funds to address.
Thank you so much. Someone shared, would there be a web portal to provide transparency and oversight?
Absolutely. Fantastic question again. As we stand this up, one of the things that we intend to do is we're going to probably spend a few $100,000 on a compliance team to make sure that we don't have this, any incestuous issues where people are concerned that it's being done in the dark of night behind closed doors. We intend to make sure that we have an outside entity who makes sure that we are compliant and that the information associated with every penny we spend is accessible to the public. You have a right to know, this is your money. You have a right to know where it goes, how we spend it, who the recipients are, pardon me, how quickly it gets into the hands of those individuals. Yes, that question is an absolute yes. We'll have a portal. You'll be able to see it. And you'll be able to call us on it. If we say that we're going to spend $1 million on some project and we don't, we're going to have to let you know, why we didn't and where those funds were spent. So, great question.
So I do have two comments. I don't believe one is a question, but the first comment is Newark residents need a hand up, not a hand out. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So we definitely want to offer trainings and education services so that many of our residents have an opportunity for employment and career training versus just, giving out this money as people are asking about stimulus. And there is also, actually, this is a question. How about custodial workers who have been working throughout the pandemic and even more? They deserve to have hazard pay. So that's more of a Newark Public Schools question.
Well, I'll take that to mean that when they say custodians, we have individuals who work for the city of Newark who are custodians of our buildings. It's their responsibility to make sure that our buildings, our offices, the public areas are cleaned and sanitized. When there is a COVID case, that team goes in there and does a deep cleaning, cleans it down, and makes sure that the office is clean, not just for the employees of the city of Newark, but for the residents who come in and need to get services. They may come into the water department to either pay a bill or to have service turned on. They have to interact with the staff, come into an area that may have had some COVID. So we need to make sure that it's cleaned and cleaned thoroughly. And those are custodians of our buildings. And so my short answer with respect to whether code enforcement should get hazard pay, I have the same short answer. Should custodians get hazard pay? Yes.
Thank you for the clarity, because usually for Newark Public Schools, the janitorial services are considered
Sure.
custodians, and we consider the city of Newark public buildings building service workers. So my apologies.
No, that's
Absolutely
fine.
correct.
Yep. But to me, they do essentially the same work and they should be treated as some difficult work under difficult circumstances at a very difficult time. And we are fortunate that we have building service workers or custodians who do a very good job and who work hard, and we need to take care of them.
Not sure if you answer this directly, Mr. Pennington, but we have another question regarding businesses. So this resident asks, will businesses that receive the recent small business grant be eligible for this new round of new funding?
Let me answer it this way. I don't think that anybody should deselect themselves from applying for funds that may be available. So if you hear about a program where additional funds are being made available to small businesses and you have already received some funds, as long as the guidance doesn't say, as a result of receiving funds from Plan A, you cannot apply for Plan B, apply. Even if you have a question in your mind, apply, and then we'll have to make a determination as to whether or not the business is eligible. And if you're not, we'll tell you why you're not eligible, and you'll get that answer. But we, again, I can't stress this enough. The plan is to get as much of this money into the hands of residents and small businesses as we possibly can.
I was waiting for this question. Will monies be set aside for homeowners who fell behind in mortgage payments, and what's the process?
Another great question. We had not earmarked money for that specific process, but again, that is something that we certainly should look at, because we do have rental assistance for those individuals who haven't been able to pay their rent. So I don't see any reason why we can't look at having a pot of money for affected homeowners who are unable to pay their mortgage as a result of losing money from this pandemic. So again, that's another area I need to make a note of it. So yes.
I had to scroll up to get this question because we didn't talk about this group of individuals, and many
Jennifer,
residents.
before you answer that question, I mean, I think that may go back to the prior questioner's question about the middle class. Typically, if you're a homeowner, that's one of the things where people say that you're middle class and they are overlooked. And I think it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we include every resident who has been negatively affected by COVID in a financial way from receiving some assistance. And so I guess that's an answer to both of those questions. We certainly need to not overlook our middle class residents. I put air quotes around that because middle class has such a connotation sometimes in my mind that's a little bit negative, but um, negative in the sense that I hear people say that there aren't any middle class people in Newark, and that's just not true. And we have residents from every walk of life here in the city of Newark, and they are the fabric of this environment, and they should be have access to these funds just like anybody else. So there's no question about it. I'm sorry, Jennifer, I cut you off with your question.
No, thank you so much for the additional information. And so this is the comment from one of the residents. Many residents became entrepreneurs after COVID created job loss. And this resident is looking to share if there could be any funding allocated for those new entrepreneurs.
Another very good question. In the past, we have made funds available for businesses that have been in existence for at least a year. The reason for that is we were concerned about these small startup businesses who would start up just so that they could take advantage of the money. They hadn't suffered any loss, but they were starting up a business to see if they could get some business loans. So it would require some additional steps in an application for us to look at whether or not the individual who started that business because they lost their job or because they had a different business and it went under, and this was there was an area where this individual thought as an entrepreneur they could make more money. So I think perhaps we should expand the application process. Again, that's something we have to look at a little bit more carefully. Because we do want to make sure this money gets into the hands of people who need it. But the caveat is it's got to be people who actually need it and not people who are just scamming the system. So we'll have to look at that. And Andre, you are on mute.
Yes, I was.
Stay down. I'm playing your role just for a minute there.
Can a grant program be started for entrepreneurs who want to start small businesses in the city of Newark?
That's definitely something we're looking at. Part of the funds we were looking to use is what we called workforce and micro enterprise development, and there's a certain amount of the funds we want to look to use that for, and they would be used in a couple of different areas. One would be to assist with ex-offenders who are coming back into the workforce. And for the micro enterprise development for small and city-owned businesses who have a business idea and they want to start that. We would likely do that in connection with or in conjunction with Invest Newark, who has expertise in dealing with new businesses. And so the thinking is that we will provide them with additional funding, and they would be able to develop the processes by which we can get that money equitably in the hands of micro businesses. That's their area of expertise.
So one of our residents wanted to share a comment. Don't let us turn into Brooklyn. Help us own these properties, home and commercial down payment assistance for residents.
Great, another great comment. I mean, again, I guess it's sort of a natural segue back to Invest Newark. Invest Newark is the entity that runs the city's land bank. We had not really considered using this money for direct, um, I guess, direct contributions to Invest Newark for the land bank. But to that point, perhaps we need to look at seeing if we can use some of this money to help individuals purchase properties through the land bank who otherwise would not be able to do so because they suffered losses as a result of this pandemic. So again, I'm hopeful that Andrea and her team are keeping notes of all these things. I'm keeping my own notes, but that's another one I think that we need to look into. So thank you.
So I must have overlooked it because I think nonprofits is screaming at me every time I scroll. I'm seeing it, so I must not have asked the question earlier. I know I specifically asked our CDCs, are there going to be monies available for CDCs? So are there also going to be monies available for nonprofit organizations?
Nonprofit organizations are businesses. And so businesses are eligible to apply for this funding. If they meet the criteria with respect to having lost funds due to the pandemic, plus the other criteria, then yes, they'd be eligible. And I will tell you, we had not done this in the past, but one of the things we're looking at is for those businesses to be eligible, we may require that they either hire an additional Norker or demonstrate that they have retained a Newark resident who otherwise would have been laid off. So those are things we're looking at. Nonprofits hire people. You hire Norkers. We want you to hire more Norkers. And so to the extent that our application process can capture those entities, nonprofit and otherwise, who are affected by the pandemic and who will be providing jobs to Norkers, there's no reason why we shouldn't be using some of this money for that, and we will do so.
So it also, I'm starting to see questions about donations. So can donations be made to, this one specifically is one of the urban farms. Can we use this money to make donations to agricultural programs, I guess, or anything in general?
Yeah, part of the the American Rescue Plan Act is to have direct assistance to municipalities of our size. But in that plan, it's a 600-page document. I should have it somewhere on my other desk, which I read. There are funds that are available through the Department of Agriculture. The money that we're getting is from the Department of Treasury, but there's funds from Commerce, from Agriculture, from I'm trying to think of other departments. There are so many departments in the federal government who have funds available, and those funds can be applied for. So our economic and housing development is going to apply for some of those funds. Our health department is going to apply for funds. And to the extent those funds are directly earmarked for agriculture and farming and the things that this person is talking about, absolutely. It's not part of this direct $176 million bucket, but there are other funds that we'll also be applying for through the American Rescue Plan Act.
Would there be opportunity for funding to go towards mental health, perhaps grieving and assisting our residents with the mental health aspect of the pandemic?
Another great question. That had not been an area that I thought of for these funds, but again, there are various agencies in the federal government who have funding for healthcare that is separate from this, that our health department is already applying for. And some of those funds certainly would be used for mental health awareness, mental health treatment, and mental health education. Indeed, there are studies out there that show that many of the kids who have been home from school have suffered to some extent as a result of being disconnected from the social activities of their friends. And so certainly those funds can be directly tied to the pandemic, but not directly from this bucket of money, but from other buckets of money that are available from the federal government, from the various departments and agencies that address that particular issue. But it's a very important question, a very important issue to address.
So the mayor always tells us to think big, think outside of the box. So this suggestion is to build a senior building. So of course it's for a personal reason, but assisting people on a regular basis with their needs, knowing that affordable housing, low income, there's always a waiting list. And there are many seniors that are in need of housing, especially, and that are on the verge of homelessness. So I'm going to jot that down for big picture, hey, that is one of those. Um, I just lost my train of thought, but basically, building a senior building is something that somebody's asking for,
Sure.
or to do with the money.
No, that's one of those big thinking ideas that you were talking about that we should look at. And I've already identified that we expect an announcement very soon about how we're going to have several $1 million available to assist with the development of affordable housing. That doesn't exclude senior housing. In fact, that may well include senior housing. So that big idea, that big thought, there's no question that that's something that we're thinking about. You're right. The mayor tells us to think big for the benefit of our residents. Our residents deserve big thinking. You deserve to have the best that anybody has to offer. And that's absolutely something that we want to do. So thank you. Please continue to think big.
This is a really good question. Are non-Newark residents who own business and or property in Newark eligible for these funds?
Yes, business owners who have businesses in the city of Newark, irrespective of where they live, potentially are eligible for some of the funding. We would like to say that as you make your money here, come on and buy a house here and live here. We want you as a neighbor, but you're not excluded if you own a business in the city of Newark and you're providing a service to our residents and you're hiring our residents and you've suffered a loss as a result of the pandemic, then yes, certainly you can apply. To the extent that we have criteria that we measure or a scale of points that we would look at to see who's going to qualify for these monies, being a business owner and a resident would give you a bit of a leg up, but you're not excluded.
Sorry, having some technical problems here. Another comment is, do the companies have to provide proof of an audit requirement by a certified accountant before they can apply, or can they just provide a profit and loss tax document? Very specific question.
Yeah, that question was very specific. It's the kind of question that makes me leery about the reason for asking that question, but you will have to submit documentation that has authenticity and reliability. There has to be some indicia of truthfulness that our auditors and the people who make the determination as to who are going to get the funds can rely upon.
Thank you. Would this money help with the big homelessness problem that Newark has downtown Newark? It has gotten worse since the pandemic.
Well, we certainly hope so. We intend to earmark a substantial amount of money to address, part of the homelessness prevention issue. Over the 2 years, it is highly likely that we'll expend in excess of $10 million to address that issue in various forms and in various ways. So yes, it's a very serious issue. It is becoming more of a problem because people have lost money and the ability to pay their rent and the ability to maintain their homes. So yeah, it's critical that those residents without addresses are included in that group of people who are who receive some benefit from these funds.
The last comment that I see actually is for allowing the fund, is the funding allowed for rehabs and substance abuse kind of programs?
Again, that's more of a health-related issue, and there are, again, separate monies available to address those concerns, some of which have already been applied for and received from our health department, and they will continue to address those issues as we move forward.
So of course, now that I said the last question, now like three or four more popped up, and we have
Sure.
about 5 more minutes left to the session. So I'll entertain the questions. So will any money go towards updating ventilation to prevent disease from spreading?
Yes, another great question. We're actually in the process of acquiring in city buildings um, ventilation systems that address the spread of COVID. There are certain systems that can be installed right into the HVAC system, but there are certain of the rooms in these buildings that don't have access through the HVAC, so they would have to have standalone units. So we're looking now at spending several $100,000 to retrofit our city buildings to make sure that the air is purified as best we can to eliminate the COVID virus. So yes, another great question.
Mr. Pennington, I just wanted to read the comment. So the very specific question about the finance, that same resident gave the reasoning, and he stated, the reason for the question is because the small organizations cannot afford the cost of a certified audit, which normally costs over $4,000.
Very good point. I appreciate that concern. It makes no sense to spend $4,000 to get $2,000. So I understand that. So I would direct that individual to reach out again to Invest Nork and its CEO and President Burnell Hall to get some assistance with respect to getting certified financial statements that they may not otherwise be able to afford. Invest Nork can assist in that regard. I don't have Invest Nork's number handy, but we should perhaps we can get that out to everybody.
Yep, 973-273-1040.
Thank you. Andrea Mason is always on top of her game. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. So there's two comments as it relates to youth. One is housing directly. So this constituent asked to think about building a place for youth to live, not mix them with seniors. So that's typically like the disabled. In the housing, I know the housing authority specifically, the disabled youth and the seniors, they can dwell together. So this is asking for it to be separated. And it says, of course, with proper guidance and assistance. And then the next comment as it relates to youth is just offering more programs and structured opportunities for the youth, especially since the summer's coming.
Yes, again, great questions. I'll take the second question first. We intend to expend several $100,000 at minimum from these funds to expand the summer youth program and to make sure that we have specific programs for disaffected youth and for those who might be at risk of engaging in behavior that will cause them to go down the wrong path. So we intend to use some of the funds for that, and additionally use funds to increase our summer youth employment program. With respect to eliminating the combination of disabled youth and seniors, that's not something that we have contemplated from this money. That's essentially a federally funded program separately through the Housing Authority, and I can't imagine, although I don't know the laws on this, but I can't imagine that we would, the federal government, anybody would create housing for youth to live on their own. So maybe I misunderstood the question, but those people would have to live with some
Yeah, I don't think
adults.
they meant youth like 17 and younger,
Oh, I see.
but 25-year-olds,
Thank
30-year-olds
you.
that bring a different element into the building with the
I see.
seniors.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. That makes a lot more sense to me. My adult old brain didn't quite get that, but I appreciate that. Again, that's a little bit outside the purview of this. It makes sense to me, but that probably is a question that should go to the Newark Housing Authority.
And you mentioned the summer youth employment program, but as I'm thinking, or when I initially read the comment about the youth programming, I was thinking more from a recreational aspect, offering more outdoor
I see.
programming and
Yes.
structured activities.
Well, absolutely. I'm looking at my screen to see what we have allocated for that area, but we intend to increase spending for recreation. Let me see if I can find my cheat sheet here. We have Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but we intend to spend, Parks and Recreation upgrades. It looks like the initial broad allocation is in the $4 to $5 million range. So yes, and that would address the concerns of that question. And that will be for upgrades to city parks and recreation. Although I must say, our parks director, who's the director of Recreation, Cultural Affairs, and Senior Services, Pat Council, has done a great job already of upgrading many of the parks. So we need to add more money to provide programs to make sure that the youth who go to these parks have a place to go. I know JFK is being renovated. The ice rink is being renovated already. I don't know if it was the Ironbound Field, is new turf is being laid. So Director Council has done a fantastic job, but we do intend to supplement that with additional funding as well.
So, Mr. Pennington, this is going to be the last question of the evening as four more pop up. So I'm going to say the last two. So this is a yes or no. Will the Newark Airport be receiving any of these funds?
Not from the city of Newark.
Okay, easy. And what about developing a disability employment program for residents with disabilities to have work experience?
I think it's a great idea. I do. And I think to the extent that we can show that individuals, Newark residents who suffer from some disability or are differently abled have been disaffected by this pandemic, then we can certainly use the funds for that. That's something we should look at in total with respect to how we use these funds. So great question. Great questions all the way around. I really appreciate this.
Yes, absolutely. So that was the last question for the evening. I definitely appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thank you, BA, for providing this valuable information, and of course the mayor for even wanting to bring it to the community to gain the insight and comments from them. As I mentioned in my opening, but if you were not aware, we do have two other meetings. The second meeting in the series being Tuesday, June 1st, Tuesday, June 1st at 6:30. And then the third and final meeting regarding the $88.3 million of American Rescue Plan monies will be on Friday, June 4th. That's going to be a special noontime meeting. So a lunch series, so from 12 to 1. And these meetings will be more interactive. Of course, you can tune in via Facebook and do what you did today, but we'll offer it in a webinar format. So if you want to put your questions in the Q&A or raise your hand so that you can be heard, we will allow that. So please save the date, mark your calendar, make sure you let others know that there are two more meetings in the series, June 1st at 6:30 and June 4th at noon. I do thank everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.